Today I'm going to talk to you about stage fright, or maybe extreme nerves. I'm also going to tell you about a time I fainted in front of an audience. This is something that happened many years ago, and it wasn't a musical audience, but there was something valuable I learned from it. And maybe you can take something from it too, if you're a performer or you speak in front of an audience. Those are two things that I do pretty frequently. I don't struggle with stage fright in that I don't get anxiety before performing, but I can get nervous. And let me see if my pup's gonna settle. All right, she's laying down. I do get nervous at times, and I can tell you when that occurs and what I do to try and mitigate against it. And this came up recently. I was performing up the street several weeks ago, and somebody asked me if I ever get nervous on stage. And I said, there's a type of nerves, but I'm not anxious about performing. I don't get anxiety or sweats or feel tongue-tied, anything like that. I'm very comfortable on stage. Back when I was about 14 or 15, I was doing a lot of writing, and my father signed us up for an article writing course at the local college. So it was a continuation or extension course, extension class. At 14 or 15, I was the youngest person. Everybody there is what I considered old. They were in their 30s, 40s maybe. I mean, I'm sure there were older people, but my perspective is that they were all really old. I wish I was as young as some of those old people were today. In the class, you had to learn how to write what's called a query letter. And it's a great practice to learn if you're gonna do any writing or submit anything to anybody. It could even be submitting music. But learning to write a query letter is where you outline the idea of your article and you pitch it to an editor. So it's really 3-4 paragraphs max, where you want to catch their attention and pitch the idea that you're the right person to write this article. What our instructor in the class did is she wanted us to present our query letter or present our article idea in front of the class, which meant you're going to stand in front of the class and you were going to kind of speak your query letter, pitch it to the audience. When my opportunity came up, I was doing an article on, I think, subliminal messages in advertising. In high school, I was completely into subliminal messages in advertising and backward masking. Everybody remembers that in the moral panic of the 80s. You play your record backwards and you'd hear Robert Plant telling you to worship Satan or something. That was fascinating for a 14-year-old. I still listened to Led Zeppelin, didn't matter. I wasn't listening to it backwards. I had to get in front of the audience and I had to pitch this idea. And when I got up there, I felt fine starting. I got up there and started to talk about my article, and then as I'm looking at the audience, I realized, and I knew it at the time, that I started rocking backwards and forwards while I was speaking. And then I reached out and I was holding on to the teacher's desk, and I just knew things weren't right. And the next thing I knew, the teacher and my father were catching me. I was literally fainting. And they sat me down in the chair next to the desk, and I was all sweaty and nervous, and people were kind of chuckling, and some people sympathetic because here's this long-haired young kid that just fainted in front of an audience, or a class, but we'll call it an audience. But here's what's interesting, and this is a lesson, something to think about if you're a performer and you have any performance anxiety. The teacher sat me down and said, and turned the chair towards her at the desk. So the class was off to my left. And she said, just tell me about your article. And so I just talked to her. We just had a conversation. It was no longer me presenting to an audience. And it was much easier. And after I'd done that for a couple minutes, she said, okay, I want you to try something else. And she had me turn my chair outward and face somebody in attendance, somebody in the audience. Not my father, even though I probably would have been more nervous speaking to him, but I just spoke to one of the other classmates. Even though the rest of the audience was there, the idea was sit in the chair, don't worry about standing up, don't worry about presenting to everyone, just talk to them. After I had done that, I was significantly more comfortable. The following week, she said, hey, are you ready to try and pitch your article? And I stood up in front of the class and I was able to do it. I think there were still some nerves, but it was significantly reduced. All you're doing when you're presenting anything or you're playing music is you're playing for one person individually at a time. Get out of your head that there's an audience there. So now I've spoken in front of audiences. I had a book published years ago, and that led me to speak at colleges and tech events. And so I've spoken in front of audiences of, 1,000 people plus, and I really get no nerves at all. I'm very comfortable with it. But it really started with that first experience being in front of a classroom and fainting, and then it just kind of grew from there. And I've worked with some artists, I work with some tech executives on teaching them how to better present their ideas in a meeting, executive meetings, or in front of an audience. People have had to speak. So I've done some coaching there. I've coached some performers. I don't do coaching with performers for pay. It's just something I've done because I'm comfortable and I've seen people be nervous and asked if they wanted some assistance. These are the things that I try and teach a performer or somebody who's speaking, but let's talk just performance. I try and teach them, the first thing is, know your material. It's so important to know your songs, right? So when I see people go up there and they have their lyrics in front of them, that's one of the first things I want them to take away. I don't want you to have to look at if you're looking at your lyrics and you don't know your chords, you're not ready to perform the song in front of an audience yet. That's just the reality. Or you're using it as a crutch. And so I'd rather you be so comfortable performing the song. If you wrote the song last week and you're not ready to perform it, don't perform it. Wait till you fully cook that idea and you've worked through it. Our goal should be to work towards performing, not playing our songs. And I've talked about this a lot. When I'm performing, I'm just immersed in the experience. Everything about me, the kinetic movement I have, my vocals, the chord changes, it's all so natural because I've practiced the song enough times that I'm no longer playing it. I'm now just performing the song. And so there is a difference. And that's what you're shooting for. If you haven't played your song out before, if you're nervous about playing, let's look back at what happened when I was in that classroom. Rather than try and perform for an audience, in front of the audience, perform for a friend, a peer, somebody you feel comfortable with, even if you're sitting down. Just say, hey, I'm gonna do this so I get used to being in front of an audience. You let them know that's what open mics are for. You don't have to sit up there and go, yeah, I've got to be an accomplished performer. You can say, and actually sometimes saying you're nervous is helpful. The audience will kind of jump on board there. Don't go on and on about it, but just go, oh, look, I'm a little nervous, haven't done this before. Sit down in a chair, face somebody you know, somebody you're comfortable with, and play your song for them. And that's all you need to do. Just play one song just to get you over that hump. And then my advice is go back and play that same song several times over the next 1 month, 2 months, go to other open mics, but the same song. Don't try and introduce something new. Just get so comfortable performing that song. Even if you start getting bored performing the same song, it's gonna teach you that practicing and preparing is the first step to being accomplished. It doesn't happen by accident. You actually have to work through those things. Just like practicing your instrument or practicing your vocals. Hi, Putt. She wanted to see what I'm doing. That's my experience with, I don't know, we'll call it nerves or stage fright or performance anxiety or whatever that might be. And that's kind of my advice, is start with just a low stakes, simple, open mic, performing for one person if you're super nervous about it. And when you get on stage the first time you're gonna perform facing the audience, then pick one person you're comfortable with and really perform for them until you feel completely at ease, or let's say more at ease. Then you might look around the audience as you're performing. If you have to come back and anchor on that person, that's always a good idea. Those are my ideas on stage fright, my experience. Your mileage may vary. Thanks for checking this out. See ya.